It was a cold Halloween night.
The final day of Samhain, when the boundary between the two worlds dissolves.
There is something different,
something mysterious out there, and it's
taking children on Halloween.
On a full moon, it will raise the spirits of the dead when lit by a virgin on Halloween night.
Don't you know what happens on Halloween?
Our son was abducted last year on Halloween.
All spells cast at Witch University become permanent at midnight on Halloween.
People, mostly criminals, are placed in an enormous wicker cage shaped like an animal or giant. The druids set fire to the cage, and the people burned to death. Purified by fire, the souls of the sacrificed make a pleasing gift to the Lord of the Dead.
There's one magical, haunted evening each year when all the scary creatures come out to prowl through every neighborhood.
In order to understand where our modern Halloween comes from, we must first take a step back in time. The word Halloween dates back to around the year 1745, and it means Saints' Evening, due to the fact that the Catholic Church designated November 1st as All Saints' Day, so All Hallows' Eve is actually All Saints' Eve. However, the origins of the holiday go back way farther than that. You see, the Catholic Church is well known for placing its own holidays directly over the ancient pagan holidays that people used to practice, and Halloween is no exception to that. Originally called Samhain, this night is considered sacred by the ancient Celtic people. It's said that spirits are able to roam freely as the veil between our world and theirs is at its thinnest point on the night of October 31st. Quote, another great festival of the ancient Celts was Samhain, which was held on October 31st, on the eve of the pagan feast, the night known to us as Halloween. This was a wild and savage occasion, with human sacrifices offered and victims burned as offerings by the druids to the gods. End quote. Now, if we take a look at this book from the year 1870 entitled Irish Folklore, Traditions and Superstitions of the Country, the picture becomes a little more clear. Quote, throughout these islands, great similarity appears to have prevailed regarding the sports and incantations practiced among our peasantry on the eve of All Hallows. Many of those customs are fast disappearing, but in former times we can scarcely doubt they had connection with certain pagan festivals. At present, they are partially continued as affording occasions for social amusements, especially amongst our young people. It was season appointed by the Druids for solemn intercession of the living and for the souls of dead persons who departed life. We are next informed that the Druids taught the Pythagorean doctrine regarding the transmigration of souls. These were called to judgment at this season by Baal Samhain. According to their merits or demerits in their past life, souls were assigned to enter bodies of the human or brute species. There were they to be proportionately happy or miserable during their next term of abode on this sublunary globe. But the punishment of the wicked persons might be alleviated by the employment of charms and magic arts, or through the means of sacrifices made by their friends to Baal. Sacrifices to Baal. Where have we seen this before? Jeremiah 19:5, and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come to my mind. 1 Kings chapter 22 verse 53. He served Baal and worshipped him, and provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger in every way that his father had done. In Jeremiah chapter 32 verse 35, they built high places to Baal in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to offer up their sons and daughters to Moloch, though I did not command them, nor did it enter my mind that they should do this abomination, to cause Judah to sin. You see, the name Baal refers to an ancient deity who some may call Lucifer himself. The ancient Hebrew translation for the name Baal is, quote, Baal, and according to the Strong's Concordance, it occurs 81 times in the King James Version Bible, and it means Baal, a Phoenician deity. So, why are the ancient Celtic people performing rituals and sacrifices for an evil deity that's mentioned all throughout the Bible? Well, let's continue reading. Quote, the day following the great festival, when sacrifices of black sheep are said to have been offered for departed spirits, while the Druids exhibited every possible description of charms or natural magic. How far the modern festivities or incantations of All Hallows' Eve have been derived from ancient Gentile rites or ceremonies would prove a question difficult to determine, but this time of year forms sort of era for its peculiar observances among our ancestors, alluding to All Hallows' Eve or vigil of Samhain. One of their practices was to assemble with sticks and clubs, going about from one house to another collecting money, bread, cake, butter, cheese, and eggs for a feast. Young females go out at midnight and cast a ball of yarn into the bottom of a lime kiln, whilst holding on by a thread. If the girl wind on and nothing hold the yarn, it is a sign the winder will die unmarried. If she feels it pull from her, she asks, "Who pulls my yarn?" When it is supposed her future husband will give his name or appear to her. Sometimes a demon will appear instead, and this latter event indicates that her death is not far distant.
Well, I heard that on Halloween night, the boogeyman sneaks out and attacks kids who don't believe.
These customs are almost entirely extinct. They were considered too closely allied with diablerie and magic to be used by any except the most reckless and unchristian practitioners. It is considered that on All Hallows Eve, hobgoblins, evil spirits, and fairies hold high revel, and that they are traveling abroad in great numbers. The darkened soul in Fuka is then particularly mischievous, and many mortals are abducted to fairyland. Those persons taken away to the raths are often seen at this time by their living friends and usually accompanying fairy cavalcade. If you meet the fairies, it is said, on All Hallows Eve, and throw dust taken from under your feet at them, they will be obliged to surrender any captive human being belonging to their company. End quote. So we have demonic beings roaming the earth, evil spirits, and fairies abducting people and taking them into another dimension. Could this holiday get any worse?
A decade ago, Halloween night, he murdered 16 people, maybe more, trying to get to his sister.
All right. The boogeyman can only come out on Halloween night, right?
Look it up. On every other night of the year, more missing children are eventually found, but on Halloween it's different.
On Halloween, the thorn symbol is actually a constellation of stars that appears from time to time on Halloween night.
If you don't know the people very well, don't go into their homes. Most people enjoy having trick-or-treaters come to their doors. But there are a few people who will do things to hurt kids.
The man known as the Halloween Killer could soon be set free, and there may be no way to stop it. Gerald Turner hits his mandatory release date in just 22 days.
Other than registering as a sex offender, Turner would have no extended supervision and no parole or probation. Julia Fellow spoke to the distraught family of the girl he murdered on Halloween 44 years ago.
Let's take a look at another book entitled Celtic Myths and Beliefs. Quote, "The Feast of Samhain was above all the most important day in the Celtic calendar. The Celts believed that the duration of the festival was a special and mystical time, an interstice between two distinct temporal periods during which the normal order of the universe is suspended and the barriers between the natural and the supernatural worlds are removed. All the gods and the dead move freely among the living, sometimes interfering with their affairs." End quote. Now, we just learned that ancient Celtic people considered Samhain to be, quote, above all, the most important date on the Celtic calendar. But what about in modern times? Isn't Halloween just about having fun now? Nobody does those evil things anymore, right? Wrong. What if I told you that modern day Satanists still consider Halloween to be the most important date on the calendar? For proof of this, let's go over to an official US government website, the National Criminal Justice Reference Service, or NCJRS.gov. Here we can find a document that tells us just how important Halloween is to Satanists. This document is called, quote, Satanic Cult Awareness, and it has some shocking information regarding modern day Halloween and the season around it. Here we are on page 17, where it says plain as day, quote, October 31st, Halloween, or Samhain, the first highest satanic holiday, celebration of the beginning of the Celtic year, end quote. The first highest satanic holiday. What does that even mean? Well, we can find the answer to that on page 26 of this document. Quote, All Hallows Eve, Samhain, Halloween, Sabbat Festival, announcing onset of two most important Sabbats. Attempts are made to break the bond holding closed doors to the underworld. And next to that, it gives some details that are too disturbing to read out loud.
But what if all of these missing children on Halloween, what if they're all connected?
A lot of nutcases come out on Halloween.
That's why they fear it, especially on Halloween.
strange thing is, most of us have no idea what we are celebrating and why we do the things we do on Halloween night.
No, I really don't, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you, why it started. It's just that it's a riot. I don't know, honestly, I don't. But I just know that Halloween is a good time for everybody to get out, put in a costume, relax, and have a good time. That's all that matters.
No, I came from where the vampire is from Transylvania.
Halloween began, we think, in the middle of Asia, like almost everything begins, well, sometimes supposes, with a festival which celebrates the equinox, celebrates the end of the summer and the gathering period, the beginning of real winter. And when this happens, you've got to do something about it. It's a dramatic moment, so you've got to do something. So you have a fire. The first thing you do is you have a fire, because this celebrates the burning of the old and the coming again of the sun eventually. And you have a dance, because a dance expresses the movement of the earth, the movement of the seasons, the way things move and shift and change. It's an active thing. And this really is sort of the basis of what we now call Halloween.
The Lord of the Dead ruled the night. His was the darkness, and all nocturnal creatures and invisible spirits sensed, dreamed, and imagined belonged to his world. On the last day of the Celtic year, he gathered the souls of those who had died during that year and led them to the other world. In those days, the phases of the moon were more obvious than the sun, and time was measured by a lunar calendar. The Celtic day began on what we now consider the eve of the previous day. So with the rising of the moon on October 31st, the great festival of Samhain began. Samhain was a strange time. The old year was dying, and the new year was yet to be born. Somehow suspended or outside time, it was a transition of great vulnerability and danger. All natural laws fell away, and the barrier between the worlds dissolved. Mortals could enter the world beyond, and otherworld spirits roamed among the living. Huge bonfires are lit on the hills to ward off evil spirits, while the Lord of the Dead leads the souls of the departed to the otherworld. To ensure a safe journey, offerings and sacrifices are made. Sacred to the sun god, horses are sacrificed, and so are humans. People, mostly criminals, are placed in an enormous wicker cage shaped like an animal or giant. The druids set fire to the cage, and the people burned to death. Purified by fire, the souls of the sacrificed make a pleasing gift to the Lord of the Dead. Each family then takes fire from the druid's sacred blaze back to the village to rekindle their hearths.
Do you know why we wear costumes on Halloween?
The Halloween custom of dressing up in costume and baking candy, nuts, and apples goes back to the pagan New Year feast. That night, the ghosts, thronging about the houses of the living, were invited to join an enormous banquet. When the feast was over, villagers wearing masks and dressed as the souls of the dead paraded to the outskirts of town, leading the ghosts away. The trick part of Halloween custom comes from the many years when the night before Halloween was known as Mischief Night. That night, ghosts and fairies roamed the roads, curdling milk and riding people's horses to exhaustion. As time went by, any practical joke could be blamed on the little people. In Great Britain, the celebration of Halloween slowly died out, but in North America, it quickly became a popular tradition. But for the most part, it lost what little meaning had been retained in the process. But now, during the last 2 decades of the 20th century, a re-interest in pre-Christian religions is changing the way a growing number of North Americans are celebrating Halloween.
Halloween, as the sun sinks and as the moon rises, the veil between life and death wavers. Evil is warded off with fires, and ghosts are fooled with costumes of ghouls. To receive a trick, you are judged for your folly. To receive a treat, you obtain a gift for your favor. However, the familiar spirits that you attract have costumes of their own. They come not as your family, but as hidden demons. To understand the origin of Halloween, we will start from the unmarked beginnings of pagan practices. Samhain is an ancient Celtic holiday that begins on October 31st and ends on November 2nd. It is a festival that celebrates the final harvest, the oncoming death brought upon by the changing weather, and the onset of winter as a whole. This 3-day period is believed to be the time when the veil between life and death was at its thinnest. The spiritual was able to cross over into the physical, however, not without a helping hand. Large fires, which we call bonfires today, had their tinder and sticks made up from the bones of the dead. These bonfires would be paraded around upon hilltops, with animal sacrifices being made to accompany the celebrations. The sacrifices would be to offer thanks to the Celtic gods and to appeal for their favor in the new coming year. This was because on the contemporary calendar, to the Celts, November 1st was the beginning of the new year. To earn favor and fortune, their New Year's wish would be decided by the summoned spirits they enticed to come closer to the flame. The Celts would wear costumes to hide their identity. This was to protect themselves if the attracted spirit was someone who they had wronged in life. The costumes would be made up of mostly animal pelts with decorations of bone. The idea being, if the person could appear more monstrous, then not only do they obscure their true self, but also frighten any unwanted spirits who may seek to do them harm. To help withhold the oncoming evil and those that brought forth its gifts, vegetables were carved as an extension of the people's costumes, and within the grotesque faces, candles were placed to help illuminate the horror. Among the many celebrations done during Samhain, one most popular was divination. The occult practice of divination was carried out in numerous ways. The famous apple-bobbing activity we do today was executed to foretell the Celts of any romantic interest between people in the new coming year. Spirits brought forth into the fray would also be requested to give guidance and advice for individuals, families, and towns, so that they could rejoice or forewarn people of the oncoming grace or judgments of the gods. Depending on the result, would influence the needed sacrifice to right the wrong. It is during these judgments that even people may be offered up to the fire. Why is it then that we continue to practice and honor pagan ways? The believed answer: an attempt to merge holidays to overcome old family traditions. Pope Boniface IV placed a holiday known as All Saints' Day to be carried out on the 13th of May. However, it wasn't until Pope Gregory III, over 100 years later, that All Saints' Day would be moved to November 1st. This is believed to be done in an attempt to supplant the still ongoing and ancient pagan practices with a so-called Christian holiday. October 31st then became known as All Saints' Eve. The Hallow in Halloween traces its root meaning to the word saints. Hence how All Saints' Eve, sometimes then referred to as All Hallows' Eve, over time became Halloween. The reason I called All Saints' Day a so-called Christian holiday is due to the truth surrounding Catholicism. The previously mentioned Pope Boniface IV, when commemorating May 13th to the saints, also dedicated the Pantheon in Rome to the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary is the Madonna of Roman Catholicism. She is the Queen of Heaven, and her many forms have been venerated even during the times of Israel. For context, we will turn our attention to the book of Jeremiah. The book of Jeremiah, also called the Prophecy of Jeremiah, is one of the major prophetic writings of the Old Testament. Israel was a nation of continual sin, with their practice and defilement being greater than their neighboring kingdoms. Through King Josiah, realignment of the people towards the Lord was obtained. However, after Josiah's death, the idolatry of old returned. Through Jeremiah, the Lord's oncoming judgments were proclaimed. Quote, "Therefore pray not thou for this people, neither lift up cry nor prayer for them, neither make intercession to me, for I will not hear thee. Seest thou not what they do in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough, to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. Do they provoke me to anger, saith the Lord? Do they not provoke themselves to the confusion of their own faces? Therefore thus saith the Lord God, Behold, mine anger and my fury shall be poured out upon this place, upon man, and upon beast, and upon the trees of the field, and upon the fruit of the ground, and it shall burn, and shall not be quenched. The Queen of Heaven is deeply linked with Kabbalistic teachings. This queen is believed to be God's wife. Her image has been plastered within many churches, cathedrals, and famous ceilings. As seen within the read verses, the practice of making cakes was carried out to honor this queen. Upon the Catholic holiday of All Saints' Day, the streets were wandered, bells were rung, and people gave out bread referred to as soul cakes in an act called souling. This was done to protect the receivers from wandering souls and to remember their departed who may not have entered heaven. This, of course, stems from the false teachings and beliefs in purgatory, where souls are trapped in our earthly realm and need assistance to move on. If you have discernment, you would have noticed how these Catholic practices and beliefs mirror that of pagan ways. The Bible teaches nothing on purgatory. When dead, your soul is judged, and depending upon your love for sin or love for Christ, depends upon your eternal location. The pagan buildings of Rome were not demolished when they appeared to take upon Christ. They remained and were renamed, including the statues of false gods turned into saints. The temple design of the Pantheon, and many Roman structures like it, honor the Egyptian-based occultic beliefs with their pyramid-like pointed tops. Many structures feature the sun in the midst of this triangle, and although the Pantheon does not, it does have a chamber in which a precisely placed hole tracks the sun's movements. The veneration of the sun and its many golden rays link to Babylon, and at its heart, Lucifer. How the fallen light-bearer has mixed truth with deception, symbolic of a serpent's forked tongue, is a topic for another day. However, for now, I will include videos from other channels that you can find within the pinned comment. For Catholics who may be watching this video, I say this with love and not to be intentionally sour. You can find and know Christ as a Catholic. However, it is like finding a needle in a haystack. There are too many perversions of truth that will cause you to stumble and fall. Only the Lord Most High can absolve you. There is no proxy when it comes to sin. Related to the devil and his deeds, we will showcase the tale of Stingy Jack. Jack's origins relate to the previously explained Celtic festival, Samhain. This festival, and the Catholic immigrants who kept their ancient family traditions and brought them to America, would be the inspiration for Jack and his lantern-like smile. It is also yet another example of how God's truth can be incorporated into paganism, and how such an event may cascade and become its own idol, representing its own being or beliefs. Quote, long ago in a small village in Ireland lived a drunkard named Stingy Jack. He wasn't held in very high regard by the townsfolk. One evening, Satan overheard stories of the devious deeds of Jack and decided he must have this fellow's soul. Jack may have been stingy, but he was quite clever. When Satan came to collect his soul, he successfully made the case that the least Satan could do was allow him to have a final drink at his favorite pub. After which, Stingy Jack left Satan on the hook for the tab. Jack suggested he turn himself into a coin to pay the bill, and they would be off on their journey to the underworld. Satan was fooled when Jack took the coin and put it into his pocket alongside a crucifix, thereby trapping Satan in his pocket. The devil begged and pleaded, and only upon agreeing to leave Jack alone for 10 years was he released. Exactly 10 years later, Satan found Jack stumbling home from the pub. With a heavy sigh, Jack looked at the devil, knowing full well that he intended to drag him to hell. Jack made the request of Satan to climb a nearby apple tree to get him a final snack to eat before the journey southbound. Satan, apparently still not as clever as Jack, climbed the apple tree. While Satan was climbing the tree, Jack carved a cross into the trunk, thereby trapping Satan up in the tree. The devil begged and pleaded, and only upon agreeing to never take Jack's soul to hell was he released. Many years later, when Stingy Jack took his last breath and died, St. Peter refused him entrance into heaven for all his evil deeds. Satan refused him entrance into hell due to their contract. In one final parting gift, Satan gave Jack an ember ablaze with hellfire. Alas, Jack was stuck roaming the earth with only a carved turnip glowing with hellfire to light his way. When Stingy Jack ceased to be, Jack of the Lantern began. Returning to the origins of Halloween, yet remaining on the topic of purgatory, it was the Protestant Reformation that changed how celebrations were done. Reformation Day takes place on October 31st, created to tackle the belief in trapped souls and their ability to wander the earth. Many Protestant Christians provided different options for those not wanting to celebrate the Catholic holiday. Instead of honoring the grave, Protestants chose to honor biblical characters, using the day as an opportunity to pray and fast, turning their full attention to the Lord. The subject of death and the practices and the celebrations related to it are greatly proclaimed as being against the will of God within the Bible. Quote, "Regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards, to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits, and after wizards, to go a-whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and will cut him off from among his people. Sanctify yourselves therefore, and be ye holy, for I am the Lord your God. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord, and because of these abominations the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee." The hatred the Lord has for those who practice the occult and worship false idols and keep their false ways within his churches is even further felt within the book of Revelation. Quote, "I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches." In conclusion, the only trick you shall receive is that of the devil. The only treat you shall inherit is that of the Lord. The only fire that is to be lit is the one in your heart. The only spirit to be spoken to is that which is holy. Remember, the world and its ways are not yours. You belong to the kingdom of heaven.